to give you a rough idea of what we're going to do, we've got a brief overview of a couple of the quests coming up. You probably know of them. We're going to go into a bit of the lore behind the Ark and the Ark Batch 2, and then we're going to have a look at the worlds of RuneScape, which was something that was quite popular when we asked what you guys wanted to see at the Lore Corner. So we're going to discuss some of the places in the game that you probably don't know too much about, but probably want to know stuff about. And then, obviously, we'll have a Q&A. So we'll start with you.
Children of Ma. So obviously we announced earlier on today that the quest is going to be called Children of Ma. And I wanted to go into a little bit about why it's called Children of Ma. So obviously we've got these characters I mentioned earlier, Zaros, Zamorak, the Marjarat. They're all children of Ma. But what's key about this is that they're all made from the same sort of energy. They're all made of this divine energy which comes from Ma. And I don't want to spoil anything just yet, but that's going to play a really key role in the quest. So it's something that ties all those characters together, and it's going to sort of push the quest into where it starts. And it may also hint at some of the other characters which could be involved in the quest. So combine that with the requirements, and some of you might be able to figure it out. And then also, one of the things I'm most excited about, which you could probably tell if you were watching us on stage earlier, is that we're going to finally let you go back and witness the betrayal. So it's a moment which is absolutely pivotal in RuneScape history, and it's steeped in rumor and mystery. So they range from, you know, the biased to the completely ridiculous, like Zaros tripped and fell on on Zamorak's staff. So we really want to go back to that moment and allow you to explore it and actually discover the truth. So you're going to find out exactly what happened, and you won't have to rely on rumors anymore. And then obviously the last most important thing is that the quest really revolves around the Marjarat as well. It's not just about Zaros and Zamorak. So what we want to do with them is position them for a new era of the Marjarat. So I feel like their story is quite limited at the moment to what the gods they follow want to do, and they're often acting in their best interests. So we really want to position them to have their own pillar in the future. They'll have their own pillar storyline. And that will give them their own motivations and their own character arcs. So we really want to explore those characters and go into real depth with them. And also we'll get to answer some of your burning questions. So for instance, who is Khazad's father? Hopefully. Yes, there we go. We will answer that for you. And that's all I've got for Fate of the Gods 2.
Okay. So that leads us on to Sliske's endgame. Yes, make woo noises. Marvelous. You woo marvelously. So the eclipse is coming. So there's a deadline approaching. The eclipse is about to happen. Sliske's endgame is Sliske's game is coming to a close. There is a deadline for all the gods in place. The scores are in, and we can see the result. Where am I? The scores are all in. But it's more than just Sliske's plan. It's more than just I've seen who's in the top score. I will hand over a thing. He has other games in play, and we will see that. And we'll learn more about the choices that you have made. As I said on the main stage, we have a choice matrix thing that we're using, and a number of different things will be looking at how that resolves. So some of the questions that we didn't answer in previous questions quests will now be answered. You'll also get to learn more about all of the characters involved. So you'll learn more about the gods, more about their allies, more about the interactions between the gods, and some of the interactions will be different on your playthroughs compared to others, because as we said, we're making it repeatable, which means you won't necessarily get all the content, and some of your outcome can be slightly different. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you some answers to some of the big questions, such as, who is Sliske's master? So at the end of Kindred Spirits, we had the Stone of Jazz. We had Sliske in front of it. He was talking to someone, and we will reveal who that someone is. We will learn what has happened to Nomad, so based on your choices, whether you let him live or die. Either way, Sliske nicked off with him. Spoilers, obviously. If none of you have played, no one tells you why did you come to this talk.
Savage.
Spoilers everywhere. And we will see, finally, who will get the stone, which again will be affected by choices that you have made. It will kickstart the next chapter of the RuneScape story. So we will bring to a close all of the Sliske stuff we've had, all the Stone of Jazz storyline. It will bring it to a close, allowing us to go into a new stage. And the obvious final point is we're going to make it repeatable. At least That is certainly the goal, to make it repeatable, to allow you to play it through again, to see the different choices you could have made, to see the different paths you could have taken, to learn more of the story. We're hoping to have some elements that you will only be able to see on repeat playthroughs, so you can get the full, complete story. So that's a very quick rundown of Sliske's endgame, which moves us on to the Ark.
I haven't played Nomad's Elegy yet, thanks. So hands up here who has been to the Ark, who's visited. Yeah, all right, that's brilliant. You've seen that there's a lot of lore in ports. There's so much lore. There's too much really to do justice to in any number of updates ever. So it was really difficult for us to come up with some narrative because we just had such a pick and mix. There were so many things we could do. And on top of that, we had loads of new things as well, and new concepts, things that we wanted to tutorialize, like unclaimed islands. And so we felt that as fun as some of the mini quests were, that overall they were quite disjointed. We did know that we needed a focus, which is why we created Jed, but he was only really a bookend for the start and the end. And so knowing that, and that we'd have the Batch 2 coming up, we wanted to create something bigger than Jed. So that's why we have the Harbinger, the ship. Small little tease, the captain of the Harbinger is called Captain Cora. So look out for her in October. Could we go on to 2? So knowing that going in, we wanted a lot more coherence with the quests in Batch 2. We're still doing the Tales format. We've got at least as many Tales as were in Batch 1. But rather than being a series of disjointed stories, there's a narrative thread that runs through that's dealing with the Harbinger and Captain Cora. And we hope that that's going to feel more like a proper quest, even if it is just Tales. Same difference, really. Yep. But another thing we really wanted to do is we've got all these new crew members, so we wanted to focus on them, flesh out their personalities, and we've also got a bunch of new islands, so we're going to be exploring these too. Hands up, who has unlocked secret crew member number 5? Oh, there's one in the audience. Wow, last count, there were 6 people, and 3 of them were on that stage. So congratulations to you. If anyone's interested in finding out who the secret 5th crew member is, that's the person to talk to, because we ain't giving it up. But don't worry too much, because that character is more just a little bit of comic relief. There's nothing you've missed out on yet. It's just that the more players that unlock him, or her, or it, we can start doing some interesting things with that character. Couple of other things is that we realised that the Ark Part 1 really heavily relied on comedy. We hope it was funny. It was funny? Was it right? That's a no then. Which is just as well, because in the Ark Part 2, because we're in October, we're moving towards a spookier feel with Halloween not far around the corner. So we're moving from comedy to horror. Unfortunately, I think we've failed at that and ended up somewhere in the middle. Well, assuming that Batch 2 is going to be funny either. I don't know. Originally, we were also going to set Halloween there, but the tales that we've created are really quite dark and horrific. So, as Joe mentioned earlier this morning, that Halloween is going to be more traditional, and it's not going to be set in the Ark this year. I think. And then, yeah, beyond... I almost said it. After we've finished with the Ark, there should be not too many loose story threads. We want something that's nice and finished and has a good conclusion to it. There may still be a couple of things that other teams or whoever ends up working on the skull, if and when that ever happens, there's something that they can pick up. Probably the main thing that's going to be carried forward is Stan's golden suitcase. If you're familiar with Pulp Fiction, this thing of his that's been stolen, that nobody knows what it is, and gets more and more ludicrous as things go on. So look out for that. Okay.
Right, so What we're going to do now is we've got what we call the worlds of RuneScape, as I mentioned earlier, which is we're going to look at have a brief look at some of the other worlds in the game. So this is beyond Gielinor. So we're going to be looking at Mazcab, the Enchanted Valley, Infernus, Terragard, and Mod Osborne is going to briefly discuss the previous revision. Briefly. If we've got time, briefly. So first up is Mod Ollie with Mazcab.
Yeah, so Mazcab is obviously a world that is mostly known for housing raids and is sort of known for its PVM content more than anything. So a lot of people haven't explored a lot of the lore, so I thought I'd go into a bit more detail about it. And Mazcab, actually, the word Mazcab means prison in the Gobi language, whereas they used to call it Chantli, which means home. So it shows that there's been a shift in them viewing their planet as their home to it now becoming their prison. And another little tidbit is that the word techie, which is the currency of raids, actually means to grind in their language. So make of that what you will. So it's a planet that was once lush and green before Tusker came, but it was actually dying before Tusker came, and that's what many of you might not know, is that it was dying already, and that's what drew Tusker to the planet. Now, the ancient Gobi in Call of the Ancestors claims to have scared Tusker away with his mean left hook, but I'm not really buying it. So the planet was already dying, and then Tusker came and she tore it apart more. And basically the Gobis, they were once a proud race before the air route subjugated them. And before, when it was dying, they built these giant temples to try and plug up the biggest leaks of the anima. So the anima was leaking, and they plugged them up with these temples. And they built these huge pipelines and vents to funnel that anima around and allow life to flourish around those vents. So that was their way of sort of trying to save their planet. And these temples also act as beacons for spirit guardians. So if you've played, well, hands up if you have played Call of the Ancestors here. Okay, so we've got quite a few of you who have met Zinacto. And Zinacto is one of these spirit guardians, and he was created from the anima, leaking and giving life to the elements around it. And Yakamaru as well, he's one of them. So they've given life to Zinacto as earth and Yakamaru as water. And they're quite similar to, say, Virago or Telos that you find on Gielinor, where the anima has actually given life to what is around it. But the difference is that they're controlled by a greater consciousness. So they're controlled by what feels like a hive mind, like one being, and that is the anima of the planet. So these guardians, they wander back to the temples, protecting and healing life along the way, and that's where they return their anima back to the planet. So in Call of the Ancestors, the Gobis unlocked the magic of their ancestors by completing the trials. And this is spirit magic, which is kind of unique to Mazcab, where they draw upon the energy of the spirits of dead Gobis to create spells. And that's what allowed them to do great feats in the past, like building the temples, despite having these huge rocks on their back. But something that you might not know is that there was actually an enterprising Gobi back in the day who this magic wasn't enough for this Gobi, and they decided they wanted more. They wanted new magic. They wanted elemental magic. And this Gobi used the spirit magic to rip the elements from the earth, from Mazcab, and this is what originally created the leaks and why the planet was dying. So that's something that isn't in-game that you might not know about. But what is in-game is that the stone fragments say that the techniques, like the temples and the vents, are a technique that has actually been lost and forgotten by the current Gobis. So the question is, can they relearn these techniques and improve on them to actually save their own planet from dying?
So, from one of the newest areas of the 6th Age, I'm going to take you on a journey back in time to one of the more obscure environments from RuneScape's long history. First of all, could I have a show of hands? Who among you has heard of the Enchanted Valley? Wow, okay, that's a lot more than I expected. You guys know your stuff. That's encouraging. Next slide, please. So, most of you know this already, but I'm going to give you a refresher. The Enchanted Valley is an idyllic woodland introduced in 2010 with the quest Fairy Tale 3. In this quest, the player is enlisted by the fairies to evict an orc from the Enchanted Valley. Since then, the player has had little to no reason to return. The Enchanted Valley is home to dryads, nymphs, and several other tree spirits. Several random event refugees have found their home here in recent years, but largely because they had to go somewhere. And significantly, the Enchanted Valley is the only known settlement where centaurs can be found. This race has gained a new relevance in the 6th Age due to Saradomin's vested interest in them. So the first mystery of the Enchanted Valley is, where is it? The Enchanted Valley is only accessible through the Fairy Ring network. So we know it's connected to Zenoris in some way, Zenoris being the land of the fairies and the nexus of the planes. So is the Enchanted Valley geographically part of Zenoris, perhaps on the other side of Gildor's moon, or is it a separate plane entirely? My preferred answer is somewhere in between. Now, I'm not planning to give you a single canonical answer today. I'm hoping to reveal this during a Death of Chivalry sequel, eventually, when the time comes. But this is the idea that I currently like the most. The Enchanted Valley is the last remnant of a lost world. This world was beautiful. It was a magical place, verdant and prosperous. This world was wrought by a cataclysmic event, or perhaps suffered from a malign influence. Whatever the cause, it is gone now, destroyed, or so it is believed. But all was not lost. Someone salvaged a fragment of this world before it was lost to us. They were able to extract a shard, a planetary fragment, and take it somewhere safe. That shard is the Enchanted Valley, and its savior most likely was Saradomin. He would have wanted to protect the centaurs from harm, somewhere where they could flourish in isolation from the threat that befell their homeworld. This shard, the Enchanted Valley, was either grafted onto Zenoris, or it remains dimensionally distinct, a pocket dimension, safely cocooned in a layer of the abyss. So what world was the Enchanted Valley once part of? We've allocated a homeworld for the unicorns, and by proxy the centaurs. This world is called Renmark, which is Nordic for pure earth or pure soil. The centaurs, incidentally, are liminal beings, hybrids. They're half human and half unicorn. Now the human part, we know where that came from, Terragard, Saradomin's homeworld. And unicorns are associated with purity, virtue, grace, and independence. Now unicorns probably don't need a world all to themselves, but if we use Renmark, it would be considered one of the light worlds, the higher planes. Our light worlds include Tarviad, the elven homeworld, and the hallowed isles of the angelic Icene. The Enchanted Valley may also have been sharded from Shannonus, the homeworld of fairies and pixies. Shannonus is one of the nature worlds. These include the homeworlds of the Garaho, the Niragi, and the gnomes. So what would the unicorn homeworld be like? It would be home to creatures of purity. They would live in harmony with nature. It's probably the origin of dryads and nymphs. It would be a realm of wild magic, a fey realm, where mythical, legendary creatures could be found. It's likely that lions also originated from this homeworld, given that the Icene Zilyana's bodyguards are a centaur, a unicorn, and a lion. Plus, the Enchanted Valley has a bit of a Narnia vibe to it, so that kind of fits. Now, unicorns are notable for their healing power. They have the ability to cure illness, heal injury, even overcome death itself. That they have these powers suggests that they lived in an environment of tribulation, strife, conflict. There was something that they were fighting against. What was this malevolent force that they were fighting against? Saradomin saw fit to rescue the centaurs and give them a new home. What terrible tragedy befell their world? That story has not yet been written. But if the Enchanted Valley was torn from a world of light, we should beware, for the brightest light casts the deepest shadow. And on the subject, thank you. And on the subject of darkness and shadow, I will pass you on to Meg Coasty for Infernus.
Indeed, Infernus. So we're going from the light and nature worlds down to the deepest dark worlds in the vast, the furthest away areas of the universe, probably near RuneScape. So Infernus is a hot, hostile world. It's suitable for demonkind. They can live there. Other races probably would struggle. It's desert-like. There are vast mountain ranges. Travelling alone would be impossible. Even in small groups, they'd have real trouble. And this place was originally ruled by the infernal demons. They have the greatest strength, the greatest stamina of all demons, and that makes them dominant. That makes them able to rule and protect. And I'll go over a brief history here. Some of this information you will likely know. Some of this will be a revelation. So the Chthonian demons, they can mutate by devouring other creatures. And not liking this this subjugation, well, not quite subjugation, this rule by the infernal demons. They're not the top dogs. So they came to rule by basically overthrowing them. They picked them off in quick skirmishes, lightning flashes, and just took them all out quickly, obtaining their power by devouring them. But of course, when you can eat your mate and gain all of his powers, you get quite worried about what he might do to you. So this paranoia and fear creates a complex legal system. If you do anything wrong against this legal system, you're found to be on the wrong side of this. Your punishment is being eaten and having your powers taken away. So nobody dares to do anything, and they enslave the Avernic demon, Avernic demons who cannot be devoured. And so it brings forth Hostilius' rise to power, the biggest and baddest of the Chthonian demons. Fast forward a few thousands, millions of years later, we have a little-known Marjarak called Zamorak. He's ascending to godhood, and in return for their allegiance, he promises to liberate the Avernic demons back on their homeworld. So they go back there with a campaign that lasts 19 years. Through innovation, confusion, and sheer numbers, he has basically all of the demons from Zaros' old army and all of these new recruits from the demon homeworld. And of course, it's victorious. They take out the Chthonian demons and the Tsutsaroth, which are the biggest and baddest of the Avernic demons. They're elevated to the power of the old infernals. This is guys like Krill, Thamaron, and Grigar. So now we have Dis, which sounds like a village in Norfolk, but this one's different. This is a massive city of 3 layers high. We have the vast layer at the bottom. Think any city in the world. Imagine that. That's pretty much what you've got with the lower layer. This is where the Infernals would have ruled. This is where everybody lived. When the Chthonians took over, however, imagine like a big plate or lots of different areas over the top. This was built by slave labor of the Avernic demons. This puts the Chthonians literally on a pedestal above everybody else. They're saying, we're in charge, you do what we say. And finally, we have the Scorched Keep, which is right in the center. This is built on the ruins of Hostilius' palace. So the Avernic demons have built this. It has 19 floors. And each floor, all of its architecture, all the grand halls, all the decor, that's all inspired by one innovation or one thing that turned the tide of the campaign for that year. And every demon wants to rise up this tower. Someone has ownership over each floor, and they're constantly in struggle to try and take each other. This is the Zamorakian way, constantly in conflict, trying to beat each other out, innovate. So now we currently have Grigar, Grigar the Tsutsaroth demon at the top. He's the big boss at the minute. And I think we'll move on to Mod Raven now, who's going to talk about Terrorguard.
Thank you kindly. So, yes, Terrorguard. So who's played One of a Kind and read Robert the Strong's book? Okay, so you've all got a brief glimpse of Terrorguard through Robert the Strong. So, Terrorguard is the original human homeworld. You can see it's a lovely, cold, happy place where everyone seems to be living lovely, happy lives. It's not at all cold and harsh and unpleasant to survive in. Nope, absolutely not. It is on Terrorguard. Wait and see if the slide will move on. Never mind. It's on Terrorguard that Saradomin ascended to godhood. So he was an ordinary person. He found an Elder artifact. Some other stuff happened that's more of a backstory than I'm going to go to here. And he ascended to become the big blue Papa Smurf that we all know and love. Incidentally, he's currently the #1 favourite for people to kill in my Hunt the J-Mod competition. So Saradomin set up a form of government. He set a form of government around what he believed to be the right way of doing things, which is through religion, through theocracy. So he set up a hereditary theocracy, which is to say that there are families into which the high priests all come from, and the high priests control pretty much everything. The high priests are known as magisters. It's the title they have. There are currently 7 ruling families. There were 12, but as you can probably expect, when everything's a hereditary system, numbers would dwindle. Not at all from certain members stabbing other certain members. Absolutely not, honest. Because that would be bad. There are 2 known names for Terra Guardian Magisters in RuneScape. They are Charon, which you'll know from the Divine Delusion in Kindred Spirits, and also Lazarcus, who you all know from the Fire Warrior of Lazarcus, which is something that many of you won't know. Lazarcus is a Terra Guardian Magister. So Terra Guardian religion is based around Saradomin, unsurprisingly, since the gods who ascend there. It's worth noting that it's based around a particular image of Saradomin, not necessarily Saradomin as we know him, and I'll come to that as to why in a bit. So, Terra Guard doesn't use magic like we would be used to. They don't use any rune stones, they don't use any of that kind of thing. Instead, they use magic derived from a single power source divided by dimensional energy. It's almost like science. But it's a kind of magically fueled science. I use the term alchemy, but that's not really a good use of the word. Think magiccience. That's a really awful word, and I apologise, but magic plus science equal Terra Guardian stuff. So the Fire Warrior of Zarkus is an example of Terra Guardians manipulating the human body, changing its genetics to allow it to be this kind of fiery, flamey thing that we all know and love. And we also know that Oreb, he's the Magister of House Charon, was able to manipulate souls, which is again not something that runestones generally let you do. So that comes from Terra Guardian knowledge, Terra Guardian science. And where does this power come from? It comes from the schism, which in the previous picture we saw that lovely big red Eye of Sauron thing in the centre of the big frozen place. That is the schism. The schism, some people think, is an Elder artifact. It is not an Elder artifact. The schism is a literal hole in reality. It is a hole connecting Terragard into the abyss. As such, being a massive hole in reality, it produces great quantities of dimensional energy. It produces vast quantities of power, which is what the Terra Guardians have harnessed. So you can see there were the 2 towers on the side with the lightning crackling onto them. Terra Guardians have harnessed all that dimensional energy. The other thing that we click on, the other thing that makes the schism fairly interesting is it is a portal. So you can travel from Terragard into the Abyss. We know this because Robert the Strong did it. It allows, and since the Abyss is connected to various places, it allows people to colonize other worlds. It allows the Terragardans to step through, go, ooh, this place is nice, I'll go and live there. So, for example, the humans that Guthix brought to Gielinor are not actually from Terragard directly, they're from one of the Terragardian colonies. It's worth noting that Terragard has since lost all contact with the colonies, which again we'll come to in a bit. So, Saradomin founded that government. He made this religion based around him. He made everyone look up at him and go, ooh, aren't you cool? But Saradomin wanted to see what more there was. So he stepped through the schism, he explored other worlds. Along this way, Saradomin went and discovered this place full of these graceful, winged, long-lived, powerful creatures, and he kind of went, they're kind of, I like them. They fit my image better. They're much cooler. I will spend my time talking to these. And he forgot a bit about Terragard. So Saradomin has not been on Terragard for centuries. This means the Saradomin that the people on Terragard worship is an image of Saradomin. Most particularly, it's an image that the Magisters have cultivated. The Magisters have used this religion to seize complete control of Terragard. They rule through fear and they rule through doctrine and dogma. They have the inquisitorial court, sort of knightly armoured people parading around the place, basically to make sure that you are in line and doing what they say. And they have done this by creating this air of superiority. The Magisters are better than people. The Terraguardians are better than non-Terraguardians. And so Terraguardians have this very isolationist thing. They're very kind of, other races are now inferior. Other humans who aren't from Terragard are now inferior. So as you can tell, it's a lovely, happy, clappy place to live, the human homeworld. So now we'll move on to Models want to briefly discuss the previous revision.
Hello, I think that's the longest I've been quiet for a long time. Sorry, it feels very strange, but I quite like it. I know you want to ask questions, so I will go through relatively quickly. the last revision has been crazily important. A lot's happened in the past revision that has never happened to the Elder Gods before. So you're talking like they've encountered sentient life, younger gods they've encountered, elder artifacts have been created for the first time. And it's the first time they've really, the Elder Gods have encountered their own mortality, the idea that they could possibly die. All of this has happened very fast and very much in the past revision. Why has so much of that happened in Elder God terms in a short space of time? So let's start at RuneScape. They created this nest for themselves, and this nest was as beautiful, as lush as Gillinor, and that was RuneScape. It's kind of hard to think of RuneScape as verdant and beautiful, but that's what it was when they laid their eggs. And once those eggs had hatched, one of them was damaged, and that was Mars. And so there were many theories about why Mars' egg was damaged, but I've talked to my dog, Zaros. He's got a theory. His theory is that Mars was ill, and illness kind of takes very different forms for an alien race like the Elder Gods. For Mar, her illness kind of manifested itself in a fascination with creating life. She just create little kind of butterflies, little things in previous revisions. And the Elder Gods were suspicious of this in their own crazy alien way. And by effectively being stillborn, the Elder Gods considered this to be a result of that illness and a fascination with life. It may well be that Mars' fascination with life kind of created the Dragonkin. That's one of the theories that my man Zaros has. But once all of the gods came to, they were hatched. They started forming planets. And Jazz feared that they weren't powerful enough. And so Jazz created the Stone of Jazz, almost to kind of fill the gap that Mar left. Stone of Jazz was there to duplicate the power of Mar. But as they started creating planets, it was clear it wasn't enough. Mar provided potential. That was largely what she was recognized for. And the planets they were creating were worse than usual. So they did something they've never done before, and they had decided to split up. Where they always created planets before, together, they decided to go on separate paths. Jazz's theory, perhaps, was that by going it alone, learning together, and then coming back together at a certain period, they would have learned more. So this is where we form kind of the elemental paths through the universe, the kind of natural paths that might have been more towards Bic. We have, and when Jazz started forming her own path, she was undoing one of the planets that she came to, and this was the Dragonkin homeworld. By some kind of freak accident, some freak of anima, one of the planets from the previous revision, so the previous universe, had the Dragonkin on it. And the Dragonkin, obviously, with Jazz holding that Stone of Jazz, coming to them to kind of destroy their world and remake it into something else, they weren't particularly happy with that. And so they decided they were going to try to wrestle the Stone of Jazz from Jazz. Obviously, there was no match here. Jazz was far, far too powerful for the Dragonkin. But Jazz saw that there was this problem. As an alien, she looked at this and saw that life desired power. Instead of us, resolving it diplomatically or by war, as us mortals and humans often think, she decided the way to resolve this was to make life and power the same thing. She fused the Dragonkin to the stone, therefore they would not desire it anymore. Whenever it became stronger, they would also become stronger. If they desired it, they would be obliterated. So she resolved it by fudging them together, basically. Very alien way of doing things. So, in turn, they were asked to protect it. And Jazz, after that moment, seeing that sentient life had been been created on this planet, decided to call almost the council of the Elder Gods. So they had all formed their 4 separate elemental paths. They rejoined again and started forming planets again. Through what she learned from the Stone of Jazz, what she gained from the Dragonkin, began putting together stronger planets, better planets, which eventually led us to Gillinor and where we are now. So I've revealed so much information in the past. I don't actually know how much of that you know and how much you don't, but hopefully that was relatively interesting.
Okay, so now we're going to open the floor up to some questions and answers. So if there's any burning lore questions that you have, raise your hand and we will try and do our best to answer them. You want to start over there?
You once said that you would never release a Zaros Godsword because that would be like too powerful to kill an Elder God or something. So with Telos released, you now have a Zaros Godsword. So could you explain why you did this?
I have no idea who said that, but
Probably me.
Thanks, Mod Osborne. But yeah, we knew that we've got other god swords. I don't think the power of the god necessarily determines the power of the god sword. Obviously, the Zaros god sword is more powerful, but we just thought that was far too cool not to put in game.
So in the World Wakes, no, not the World Wakes. It was while Guthix sleeps. We touched the Stone of Jas, and we were not the World Guardian at the time. So why were we not permanently empowered?
Sure. So this kind of effect has to come in over a long period of time. So you see with examples like Zamrak, who's held the stone for a long time, this power is constantly being brought into himself. He's using the stone constantly, and the effect is more and more permanent until he becomes a god. Because you've only used it a couple of times in a couple of really brief situations, it kind of leaks back out again, and you don't kind of hold it all in, really. I think that's more the fact that he's kind of charging it back up. He's got an empty tank, like he's kind of built the tank as he's gaining godhood, and he's just kind of filling it back up again. Absolutely.
In the past, you've done a little bit with time travel, like with the enchanted key, and now you've always had the stuff with the betrayal. Will there ever be like going back in time and bringing something back that is like permanently dead, like a god?
So betrayal isn't time travel. That's a good point. The way our time travel sort of works is that we try and avoid stuff like that, because if you have it that you can just unwrite everything immediately, it means that no choice has any meaning. It means that anything you do becomes ultimately meaningless because you could go and fix it anyway. I really dislike the idea of, for example, going back in time and saving Guthix, which is what generally people say, or maybe Bandos that people want. But it's no, they need to be they need to die, they need to be dead, and their death has to have meaning. So Guthix's death carried a kind of sense of sacrifice with it. He, along with it, allowed it to empower the player to be the world guardian. But and to kind of undo that, sort of, it just ruined. It's a bad story idea. And I think we can do better things than going back and fixing everything with time travel, personally. I mean, I hate time travel. You may have noticed this from my response. I really hate it. But I don't think it's something we would do. I would certainly fight heavily against it as something we would do. So.
At the end of the RuneScape novels, without spoiling it, main characters go off to chase Angry Werewolf Man. Are there any plans to set out what happened to them during I think it was a 5-year period between then and the start of the game?
So you probably notice how we're doing it now, which is taking individual stories of those characters and filling in that time period. So obviously we talked to Jared and met Jared. And that is by no means the end of Jared's story. There will be more filled in, I'm sure, in the future. So we're not going to dedicate a quest to filling in that gap. We're not going to release another novel, but we do like the individual characters. I had a pitch brief to me just recently that had Castamir in, which threw me a little bit. So I mean, it does happen, and we're probably just going to take it in isolated chunks. Just like we introduced Karamara as well, for example. So I don't have a really satisfying answer for you, I'm afraid, but it may well happen over time.
So I kind of had a question about the power level of the player character, because we have several encounters in the game that would make us really powerful, like beating Nex one-on-one, or Araxor, or Talos, most exemplary. And then we get kind of smacked around by Sliske. And I'm kind of wondering, so where are we power-wise?
Yeah, sure. So Sliske is pretty powerful. That's probably worth mentioning. In fact, Sliske is quite powerful. Don't forget what Sliske has access to at the moment. So Sliske is a benchmark for power, not necessarily the prime example. It's a video game. I will set that in there. So the player has to be able to do cool things. And fighting some of the big characters like Nex and stuff is a cool thing. I think the player is definitely powerful. They're able to stand toe to toe with the gods. They're not able to wield the sheer power of the gods, but they're able to kind of take part in the same games, the same arenas, because they've got that resistance, that world guardian nature. Sorry?
Skill-wise rather than power-wise?
Yeah, I think probably. Oh, I'll pass back.
I also quite like to think of it as the player has certain immunities. You know, it's almost like a role-playing character. The sense that the player is not as powerful as a Zaros or a Saradomin or a Zamorak. It's likely we'll never make the player as powerful as them. But ultimately, as the World Guardian, they've gained certain immunities, and those immunities are very helpful. The gods are prevalent. The player is able to, thanks to Gothics, effectively nullify that god power. So in god terms, yes, we're suddenly elevated, but in kind of, you put me in a wrestling match with Virago, sorry, not me personally, you know, we have a tough time of it. Oh, Legend Arts, go to town.
I was wondering, about
It's surprisingly loud, isn't it?
Yeah, Menaphos. We haven't seen anything done with Menaphos in a long time. Is there any plans to visit that anytime in the near future?
No, there isn't. I'm sorry.
Hello? Yeah, okay. I have a question. First the question itself, is Brassica Prime the most powerful god of them all? And the reason I am asking this is because Gothics banned all of the gods from Gelinor, but Seren, when she shattered herself, she said that she was almost driven mad by Brassica Prime, talking about how many ways you can make a cabbage delicious.
So, we need to look at our characters in terms of their voice acting, and the best voice acting determines the power of said character. And as Brassica Prime has the greatest voice actor of all time, I think it's clear that yes, he is definitely the most powerful entity in the game. I think that's just absolutely certain. Stop there. I was going to give an actual answer, but I'm going to leave that there. That's perfect. Next question. Oh, last question, sorry.
Should Saros destroy the Elder Gods? What will he do?
Yeah, we've got find a new hobby so far.
It might be the case he hasn't thought that far ahead. He's far too busy trying to do what he's trying to do. I think maybe he hasn't even got to that point yet. He's just so focused on trying to achieve his goals.
As Majorot are beings created by with divine energy, they, of course, as seen in the books of the kindred spirits, don't have a soul, so they don't get an afterlife. How do they personally deal with it, especially Sliske? With the fact that if Sliske dies, he leaves nothing. He just sizzles out.
Okay. So, Kindred Spirits was kind of about that. I mean, one of the reasons he was trying to nab the player's soul was so that he could have a soul. So in Kindred Spirits, you were going through, and if you look at what's actually happening, the reason it's called Kindred Spirits is because Sliske was manipulating the player. He was getting the player to think more like him, act more like him, and in doing so was making his soul more compatible with Sliske. It's effectively think of it as a transplant and trying to make the organ more compatible with the host. So Sliske was trying to get round that problem so that he could have an afterlife of his own. That is one of his motivations behind the other massive pile of schemes. But yeah, that was one of the reasons behind it. I hope that's the answer you're after.
And the rest of them? The rest of them?
So obviously in Fate of the Gods 2, Children of Ma, that's where we're going to be exploring more about how some of the other Majorat feel, and in particular dealing with how they're a race that is they're basically, I don't know how to phrase this, but they're a reducing race, but oblivion is basically just looming down upon them, and they want to escape that, and the fact that they don't have an afterlife as well probably just increases how terrifying that is to them. So yeah, in Children of Ma, that's where we'll explore that a little bit more.
So that's all we have time for now, but I know some of you have some burning questions, so we're going to kind of hang out just outside there, just in the outside where it's nice and cool. And if you've got any questions, just come up and ask us. Otherwise, I hope you've had fun. I hope you've learned some interesting things, and there you go.